take a look on page 100. There's a little chart over there. And that chart will show you basically what we've been through. We've been discussing the neshama, what we've learned about the neshama so far. We learned chapter 2 that the essence of the neshama, it's a chelek elokah mimal. It's part of God, but it comes down into a body and so on. And the application was that you connect to a tzaddik to connect to your most inner self. Tzaddik is connecting to you, to that essence of your soul. That's what we got in chapter 2. Okay, in chapter 3, we learned the structure of the soul. It has intellect, it has emotions, as it comes into the body, it has all these things. And they follow the model of the 10 sfirot. And the emotions are the children of the mind, or at least when it comes to the divine soul. So the application was you contemplate the divine to give birth to lasting emotions and attitudes. And that's how you change, to develop those emotions. And then what do you do with those emotions? You invest them in clothing, which is chapter 4. Invest those emotions that were achieved through that contemplation into the clothing of thought, speech, and action of the mitzvahs. And that connects the soul to way beyond itself. So you embrace with God through mitzvahs that are an outpouring of your soul. Okay? And now in chapter 5, we get to going beyond the mitzvahs in learning Torah. And learning Torah has something about it that you don't have in just doing mitzvahs. Because in mitzvahs, he said, you're in embrace with God. God's holding you, you're holding him. Embracing us. How can you get better than that? And we said, like at the end of that chapter, we said that's greater than anything you achieve in Gan Eden. Go to the garden, even go to heaven. The neshama can go very, very high, but it never has God himself. It has radiation, has information. It has it's enjoying it, but what it's enjoying is not God himself. But when you're doing a mitzvah, you have God himself. This is him. He put himself into these mitzvahs. So you're holding that lulav and etrog, you're holding him. You're doing this mitzvah, saying, helping somebody, giving tzedakah. You're being him at that time. So what could be greater than that? Well, the issue is that you did the mitzvah. You went through it, so on. And now the mitzvah's over. Okay, so you've got an everlasting connection. It doesn't go away. That connection stays. It's eternal. But did you change? You're still the same person. At that point, you were one with God, fine. But now afterwards, it's like something that enveloped you, like clothing. You put on the clothing. Now you took off the clothing. At the time you put on the clothing, you were a different person. It's clothing changes.
If you make the effort, though, right?
When you take the clothing off, you're back to the same person you were before.
But if you make the effort, or without making the effort?
So, well, what is the effort? What is it that the person
Well, if it's just
do?
mechanical, well, we talk about that.
No, we're not talking about a mechanical emotion. We're talking about emotions that, about actions, thoughts, speech, and actions, mitzvahs that a person did, and his emotions were invested in.
Right, that's
emotionally invested in.
But just to act off.
But emotional action and so on doesn't really change the person. Oh, Rob is somebody who was here last week. I only have 2 people in the room who were actually here last week. We're going through the review now. So how do human beings change? What do we call that? There's a process that human beings go through whereby they take experiences and those experiences change them. Or you go through, you do something and the doing it changes you. Or you find out something and the finding out that something changes. What do we call that?
Learning.
That's it. Somebody was here last week? Okay. Learning. Great. Thank you. We call it learning. Okay. So really what we're discussing in this chapter is what does learning mean? And learning is much, much more than downloading information. Much, much more than that. If somebody who downloads information has not learned. That's not what learning is.
Is learning and DOS the same thing, or is that different?
It has to do with Chochmah and Bina Das. That's what we're going to see, how Chochmah and Bina have to do with this. And Das is when it becomes real, comes into you. But there's much more to it than that. It's Chochmah and Bina. So we're going to see how this works in this chapter. So I guess I'll go back over this again. Where does this here? So he said in the last chapter, this is in page 12. We said that. Oh, Scott's not here. That's Scott. Scott brought wine. I'm still waiting for Scott to come back with the wine. And I suggested in the summer he could bring sangria.
One or two.
If you want to bring the one,
Extra cake, we can.
you don't want to find out anything. But it's after dinner is the problem. Okay.
Who is gonna miss one?
Sorry, he just brought bottles of water, but I'm sorry, I don't know how to pour that out. I don't know. Okay, so in the last chapter, you said that no thought can grasp you, grasp God. I mean, grasp. So we said no thought can grasp Baba, but nevertheless, when we have mitzvahs and Torah, we're grasping it. Well, what is this grasp? What does it mean to grasp something? So if I grasp this, I'm not really grasping it because not all of it is in my hand. But if I would grasp something, okay, whatever it is, that's totally inside my hand. The thing, Noreen, not in Noreen. Okay. If I grasp something totally, it's still there in my hand. If I open my hand, it falls down. But grasping mentally is not like that. When you grasp something mentally, it's more like how your stomach grasps things. It digests it. And what it grasps becomes part of you. It becomes your blood and flesh. Now you really grasped it. But the mind really does even more than that. Mind does a type of grasping that's way beyond even what the stomach can do. Because when the mind grasps something, it reforms itself to reflect this thing that it grasped. So when you grasp food and you digest the food, you metabolize the food and you convert it into energy or proteins to build it. It doesn't change who you are. Maybe some foods will change who you are. People who go to McDonald's, say if you go to McDonald's for 30 days in a row, become a monster, get all fuzzy. So maybe it does. Start thinking differently. But when you absorb an idea, your brain now reorganizes itself according to this idea. And you cannot divide between the two. You can't now extract that. Like if I take salt and put it in water and I stir it up and I get a salt solution, but I can evaporate the water and have the salt again. Even if I fuse hydrogen and oxygen and get water, there are ways with enough energy to how do you say that? Fission, to take them apart again.
You can also desalinize.
Desalinize, but I mean, even oxygen, you have ways of taking, you can make a hydrogen battery where you get hydrogen out of water. Okay. So, but with the mind, once it comes into the mind, it's the mind and the idea become one. So it was the way Rambam, Maimonides describes thinking is very, very amazing. So Rambam describes Aristotle thought that thinking is the highest thing you could do because you're in total oneness with thinking. Why did Aristotle think that? Because he was a thinker, right? So of course, if you're an engineer, you think the greatest thing a human being can do is engineering. If you're an artist, you think the greatest thing an artist and if a human being can do is art, right? If you're a truck driver, you think that's so if you're a thinker, you think the greatest thing a person can do is thinking. What's the proof? I'll give you all sorts of proof. The real proof is I'm a thinker, so therefore must be the greatest thing. Okay. So anyway, so Aristotle said that you become one. Therefore, he thought that God is thought. God is just mind. That's what he thought. Because that's the highest thing you can do. Which really means that since I'm a thinker, God must be a mind, right? Must be like me.
But then he's limiting.
Yeah, well, that's how the system works. Okay. So anyway, but Rob describes very interesting how his understanding of thinking. He says, when you think, says you think that you're thinking about something. So I'm thinking about this bottle, or he gives the example you're thinking about a water clock, which is probably really high tech in those days, a water clock. Okay. So he says, when you examine the water clock, you see how the water clock works, and you create a mental image of this water clock. What have you done? The water clock itself is made of material, and it has form. So it's form and matter. You discard the matter and take the form, and you bring that into your mind. And now your mind makes a model inside itself of this water clock, the form of the water. We have that. And he says, at the time that you're doing that, you're totally absorbed in your thoughts. Like I can't get you into anything else. You are there in your thoughts, you can't be doing anything else. But when you really think about that, there's nothing else you can do at the time. And the idea is absorbed into your mind. So your mind, and this thought that you're thinking about, this form of and function of the water clock, have all become one. Totally one. It's only that with human beings, that's only at the time that you're thinking it. And then you stop thinking, and your mind and the thought all go their distinct ways and become three things again. However, God, he says, is always, that's constant, never stops. So there's always that one. That's how he describes God. So therefore, what the Rambam is describing is contemplation. So even today, everybody thinks, wow, contemplation, meditation, if I could do it and be consistent, I'd be so enlightened. And everybody pays their big bucks for the mindfulness class and the mindfulness apps, and like 0.01% of them can actually continue doing it. But we still have this belief that contemplation is the highest you could achieve. You're sitting in a state of stillness. I think I described a few weeks ago that the first time I sat down and thought about one idea for a whole hour, and I felt so refreshed afterwards. I didn't know I had a brain until that point. Wow, I can actually sit and think one idea. So it was very refreshing. Okay, but what the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us here in Tanya now is actually there's something that's a much greater oneness than contemplating, and that is learning. And basically because in contemplation, you're still stuck inside yourself. Whereas when you learn something,
it becomes one.
You've transcended yourself. Because you become something with something outside of yourself, beyond you, something that beforehand you could not comprehend. And if you've really learned it well and know it really well, you know that you still don't comprehend it. Okay. So you learn something and you make it one with you, and it's something that takes you beyond yourself. Okay, so let's read inside. Previous chapter mentioned the words of Elijah the prophet, no thought can grasp you. So let's take this idea of grasping the divine further, clarify it. Well, let's say your mind has formed the concept of an idea and gotten it straight. Like I just described that you're learning, Rambam described with the water clock. But after you've learned this, okay, you've learned it, and we're not talking about a water clock, an idea, some sort of idea. And the idea we're going to have is, like, for example, a halacha, but just an idea for now. So your mind's formed the concept of this idea, it's got it straight. You've now learned it, not the time you're contemplating about it. After you've already learned it, your mind has absorbed it. Your intellect now grasps the idea and mentally encompasses it. Because where's the idea? It's inside your mind. And from the other perspective, it means the idea is now grasped, encompassed, and developed within this mind of yours that's gotten a straight formed a concept of it. That's called grasping, right? It's inside your mind. Your mind is encompassing it, and it's inside your mind's grasp. That's what's happened. And there's another dynamic as well. While you are actively grasping the idea at the time of learning, contemplation of learning, and trying to get it straight in your mind is enveloped within the idea. Like we say, you're engaged, you're absorbed within the idea. And the proof for that, like I was explaining last week, was you can't think two thoughts at once. No, like those images where it could be one thing or it could be another thing. It could be the boxes, could be one way or the other, or those extra drawings, the things you could interpret in two different ways, but you can only see one of them at a time. You can't see both. So you're absorbed within it. You can't think two ideas at once. And your brain doesn't do it. Because you can't be inside two things at once. You're totally within this thing. So you can't be absorbed in two ideas at once. You can feel two feelings at once. You can do two things at once, but you can't think two things at once. When you think that idea, you're inside it. Also, now I can give an example. For example, you understand some halacha of the Mishnah or the Talmud, and you've got it thorough and clear. Right? This is the halacha. If this case comes out this way, your mind now grasps that halacha, encompassing it. And as well, at the time you were pondering this halacha, your mind was enveloped within it. Okay? So the two dynamics are happening, but the main dynamic we're concerned here is with the one when you've learned it and you've grasped it and it's become one with you. Let me articulate once again. The grasping, though I didn't see it here clearly, is more than grasping physically, more than grasping even with your stomach, because they've become totally one. You're totally encompassing it, not like it's here and you're, no, it's all became merged and integrated, fused. The fusion that's happening. Okay, now this halacha is God's essential wisdom and will. God desires that if Reuben presents a certain argument, for example, and Shimon puts forth another, the final ruling between them will be such and such. That's a typical halacha. This guy said, he hit me. And the other guy says, yeah, I hit him. Well, what do we do now? Well, he bruised me. And so therefore, you have to pay this amount. And then you have to pay for the doctor. And okay, that's the ruling. And even if such a case with these particular claims and demands never came to judgment and never will, nevertheless, what matters is that this is God's will and wisdom. If one person will argue like this, and the other would argue like this will be the ruling. That being so, when you know this halachic ruling and you understand that as set out in the Mishnah, the Talmud, later halachic adjudicators, your mind comprehends, grasps, and encompasses God's desire and wisdom. Now, let me ask you a question on the text. It seems very straightforward. What does it matter? Why does he have to point this out? That even if this case would never happen, why is that so relevant? He wants to say that you absorb this idea. Well, this idea is God's wisdom. God's wisdom has now become one with you. And he says, even if the case, that's a case with these predictions, it never come to judgment. Never will. Why is that important?
Because that's how we connect with God.
Okay, so if it were a case that actually happened, does that take away from it? Would that change anything? So, and you have a lot of these cases. You have a lot of cases when you're learning Talmud, all sorts of cases of things or whatever. Even in Chumash itself, there's a famous case in Torah that the rabbis say never was, never created, never going to happen. You know the case?
No.
There's a case of the rebellious child, right? The rebellious child, he doesn't listen to his father and his mother, and he guzzles down wine and meat and so on. Doesn't listen to anybody. So I said, well, just a minute. How old is he?
Mm-hmm.
If he's before bar mitzvah, then he's not punishable. If he's after bar mitzvah, he's not the child anymore. He doesn't have. So what age is he? It must be like a 6-month period just before his bar mitzvah. And we checked him out, saw that he has a good head and he understands what we're talking about. And so just a minute, he doesn't listen to his father and his mother. It means his father and mother talk exactly the same, say the same words. We're going to find father and mother telling him exactly the same, treating him the same. Doesn't happen. Okay, and he has to drink a huge amount of wine. The amount of wine and the meat that he has to drink, and he has to eat it raw. And all these cases say, lo haya v'lo nivra. Never was, never happened. So why is it telling you this? One possibility is telling you this because it's just you can scare your kids. You don't want to get stoned, you know. Actually, so what the rabbis say, Yagdo Torah v'yadu, you have more Torah. What's that all? We have more Torah. So if everything in Torah would be practical, we would be understanding the why are we learning Torah, so we know what to do. And what's Torah all about? Well, God made this world, and then he saw we're messing it up, so he needed a solution, and he came up with the halacha of Torah. That's what we would think. So what are we connecting to when we're doing? Not connecting to anything. We're just leading better lives and treating the planet and humanity better. That's all.
Is it to teach us how to think?
So now, no, hold on. Much more than that. Now we see that there's all these halacha in Torah that couldn't be, never happened. Right? I have a case where a Kohen is taking the korban that's been brought to him, and as he's slaughtering, he's thinking, I know that I'm not supposed to eat this on 2 days from now, but I'm going to slaughter on condition that I'm going to eat it in 2 days from now. And obviously, no Kohen would ever do such a thing. But there's all these halachas about it. It's mentioned in the Torah, and all these halachas about it. Why? Because now you have to reframe what Torah is. What is Torah? It's not a solution to a problem. Isn't it? It's just, you're thinking, no, the world is the problem. The Torah is the solution to the problem. No. Torah is the problem. God created the world so that he could give us Torah. He created the problems in the world so we would be able to learn Torah. So the reason why there are thieves, robbers, and damages, and rebellious children, and all these things, is because God wanted to share his wisdom with us. So what does he need to do? He needs to make a story. And in this story, you'll be able to learn the story and learn what to do in the story. I always think of it as a kind of, you're in a video game type of thing. And God wants to teach us. Imagine a father who wants to teach his children wisdom, and he's a video game designer. So what does he do? He makes a game for them. And in the game, they're going to go through all sorts of experiences and do them all sorts of things and have to make all sorts of decisions. That by making these decisions and learning these things, they're going to learn how their father thinks.
Yeah.
Which is what the world is all about.
Mm-hmm.
So God says, how am I going to communicate to them this wisdom? Well, I'll have an idea of private property and theft. Okay, so I'm going to need a world with private property in it and theft. Okay. I'll have an idea of a cow that you eat only if you slaughter it correctly. Well, I have to make cows, I have to make grass, I have to make slaughtering knives, metal, all those things. I'll have an idea of the one way they'll connect with me is by saying Shema in the morning and Shema at night. Well, how am I going to make there's going to be morning and night? Oh, I'll have an earth and then a sun and rotation and a whole bit. Okay.
I don't imagination.
So that's the game that he's designing so that you can. So
The matrix.
and just so you can always remember that it's not about solutions to problems. It's about grasping his wisdom. He puts all these halachas here that will never happen, never apply. So you understand that. So now, to this day, we learn all sorts of all these halachas. We learn all of offerings in the temple, even though we can't do them.
But I thought that
Torah, even if we can't do them, we're still learning them.
I thought that after Mashiach, everything is fixed.
Everything, yeah, but many things will not return, and we still learn about those ones as well, and they will remain Torah even afterwards. It doesn't have to be applicable to be God's wisdom.
Okay.
It's just God wants to share it with us, so He shares it in things that are applicable to us, because that way we can relate to it. But it's not so much that it's applicable, it's more that it's something we can relate to. It's things that we could imagine happening in our day-to-day world.
So is learning like connecting with God, and that's what he wants?
That's what it's about, totally. That's the whole point. That it's not about gaining knowledge, not about acquiring more and more information. In fact, Moshe Cordovero says that somebody who learns Torah to gain knowledge,
It's like
perhaps
helpful.
better that he never started learning,
Yeah.
because that's not what it's about.
Mm.
It's in order that you are connected. When you're gaining this knowledge, you are absorbing God's wisdom, and you're becoming one with that wisdom. Put it this way: it's learning Torah is learning to think like God. Like in that example of a video game, learning to think like Dad is learning to think like God. That's what it really is about.
So if you learn to remember that example you gave of that king that gave food to the poor people. I'm screwing up the story with Joseph, I think.
Joseph gave forth to God.
There was I think it was Joseph. He told the Egyptian king that he should Avimelech.
Oh no, Daniel told him.
Daniel, yes, thank you. Yeah.
Close, not Joseph, but Daniel, not Pharaoh, but Nebuchadnezzar, not Egypt.
Sorry, I'm screwing it up.
Okay, yeah.
But he told
Close. Otherwise, everything was.
Yeah, he told him to give food to all
There's just social welfare, yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't. He did it, but not for the right means. So, like, if you're learning Torah and you start, I don't know, making it up, give tzedakah. I don't know.
If
like
you start learning Torah for the wrong reasons, right? Let's say a
kind of
person
like reading The
Torah.
Prince or like Sun Tzu, like The Art of War, but you're getting.
So he wants to learn this as well, as well learn Torah.
Oh yeah, like Torah is going to teach me to be better at business, or
So there's a long discussion in halacha. If somebody comes to you and says, "I want to learn Torah," just because I learned all sorts of other things, so I want to learn this as well. So should you learn with him? Or let's say somebody says to you, "I want to learn Torah. Why? Because I want to marry this girl, and she won't marry me because I don't know any Torah, so I want to learn Torah." So should you learn with this person? Okay, so we say that in general, start learning with a person, and eventually, when it's first you'll start for the wrong reasons, eventually start learning for the right reasons. Eventually. And then when he starts learning for the right reasons, all the Torah that he learned before will be part of that learning. And so it all becomes for the right reasons. The only case where you don't do that is where somebody wants to learn so he can argue. The only reason he wants to learn Torah is so that he can prove it wrong.
Like a self-hating Jew type of thing.
So you have not necessarily self-hating, but he's determined to show that it's wrong. Then you got to start with something else. So that gets problematic. So there was what's we call it? Very active person in I wouldn't say he was a rabbi, but Zell Newman in Toronto. Very active in the community activist. And conservative rabbi asked him, he wants to learn Torah with him. So he wrote to the Rebbe about this. Should I do this? The Rebbe wrote to him all sorts of conditions. What he could do and what he couldn't, all sorts of conditions. He wouldn't apply to somebody else. Because what's the conservative rabbi is going to come and show that everything in Talmud says the conservative, his way of doing things and so on. You really don't need mechitza. Well, why is he learning this? So that's what you have to know. But otherwise, in every other case,
Do you know what?
when people are learning, you give them reward. Children, you give them rewards, and when they get older, you tell them, don't learn, you'll never get a shidduch, something like that. But you try. I mean, how often do we actually do things for the right reasons? So if we would wait for that,
Then you'll never
get.
do it.
We say miteich shelo lishma balishma. From the not doing it for the right reasons, you come to. But the reason, the words in Hebrew have much more meaning. Miteich shelo lishma, which means like on the inside of this wrong reason is the good reason. He thinks he's just coming to learn for this reason or that. Really, his neshama wants to learn. That's what's inside there, and eventually it's going to come. We take shalosh. Okay, but the point is that Torah is not problems to solutions. Torah is your mind comprehending, grasping, encompassing God's desire and wisdom. You're grasping God who cannot be grasped by any thought, neither can his will or wisdom, yet clothed within these halachos that have been made accessible to you, to us, you do grasp. So you're going to say, well, all I grasp is that if he beat him up, he has to pay this damages. So if two people come and they're both holding on to the same item, and this guy says, I found it first, and he says, I found it first, you split it. That's all I learned. Yeah, but if you're learning that properly, you're learning a lot of wisdom. And that wisdom is coming in the form of this case or that case. But the actual way of thinking, that way of thinking is a divine way of thinking. It's not a human way of thinking. Rabbi Kaplan is my Rosh Yeshiva in Seattle. He told me that if you learn a Gemara and you learn it really well, you say the whole thing, and you can explain and answer all the questions, and everything makes perfect sense to you, you must have learned it wrong. So why? Because it's impossible that a created being should understand the mind of its creator. So that you're learning it right when something's not. This is bizarre. Something's strange over here. That's not a way of thinking. Oh, now we must be getting it right. I mean, you see the logic behind it, but it's a different kind of logic that you see in Torah all the time. Let me give one example. Yeah, very key. When we're learning secondary subjects, whether it's in science or mathematics and so on, what's the right answer? Who was right in the end? In Torah, you don't say, that's not what it's about. Somebody says, well, Rava says like this and Abai says like that. Well, who was right? No, we don't say that, who is right. The answer is, the right answer is Abai says like this and Rava says like that. And then was I telling this last week, the Gemara in Gittin, where the rabbi's learning that Rabbi Nosson said like this, and Rabbi Abiyasser said like this, and they're both arguing with each other. And so he learns this, and then he meets Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. Elijah the prophet, and I have this question. I know Rabbi Nosson says like this, and Rabbi Yezer says like this. What does God have to say about it? And Eliyahu says, oh yeah, he says that Nosson, his son, his child says it like this. Rabbi Yezer, his son, says like this. That's not the way human beings think, right? We want to know when we learn something in Chumash or Tanakh, what actually happened? Well, according to Rashi, this happened. According to Ibn Ezra, this happened. According to David Kimchi, this happened. Yeah, but which one actually happened? According to who? But which is true? They're all true. They're all true. Well, that's not the way human beings think. Well, this is Torah, So,
well, I was going to say, if you're not understanding it correctly, but you just answered it, are you really becoming one with God and His wisdom and His will? But you just said we could have different opinions and still
right. So,
grasping this.
but like I said, all of them are correct. So you're understanding correctly that everybody disagrees. As long as you understand that everybody disagrees, you're okay. As soon as you think that they're all agreeing with each other, then it's not okay because they're disagreeing with each other. Although sometimes they seem to be disagreeing, but they're really agreeing. But even then, they're thinking along different lines. So,
Well, then are you really grasping God's will?
yes, so you're grasping it. If you can say, well, he says like this and he says like that. When we got our exam for smicha, rabbinical ordination, right? So he would ask you a question. What's the halach? You're supposed to say, well, he says like this and he says like that. That's correct. If he just says, well, the halach is like this, he looks at you like, did you learn this stuff or not? No. So what are the 5 reasons given for salting meat? You have to give 5 different reasons. Well, which one's the right reason? I got one kid who was booted out of the exam because he said, couldn't remember the 5th reason. He said, I think the Beis Yosef's uncle had a salt factory. that was the end of him. I couldn't speak of that. Okay, so so the point is that this idea has become one with your mind. And as you are learning, on page 106, your mind is immersed within them as well. And that's when we get to this wondrous and exclusive union. This is an amazing union. There's nothing like it or even approaching it among physical things, nothing at all. You grasp Torah, and your mind and God's become an absolute singular oneness from every angle and in every way, which was what I was describing to you before, that the mind becomes the Torah, not absorbs the Torah, but becomes. Let me just want to give another example of that. When you learn a new idea, like why is it not just downloading information? When you learn a new idea, everything you've ever learned before has to change. For example, when I was, I guess, a teenager, we finally got a photograph of planet Earth from out in space. They were bugging NASA to get a color picture from finally. Can't remember who was the guy. He became famous afterwards with the whole environmental movement and everything. But he bugged them to get a picture for everybody to see the world from outer space. And when we saw that picture, we just had to shift everything. No artist had ever done that. No artist had imagined the world looking like that from outer space. It was completely a different thing than you would have thought. And you're looking at this thing, saying, this is the most beautiful emerald I've ever seen in my life. This is totally awesome. And there was a whole shift in your way of thinking of what is this place down here. When you saw that picture, everything changes. But a similar thing happens. You take your kid to the beach, say on the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean, and the kid looks out and wants to know, how far does the water go? You say, well, on the other side is China. And there's people over there. And boats come across. And what happens if you keep going? If you keep going and keep going, you get back here. The kid starts thinking about that. His whole concept of himself, of the world, of everything has now changed. Now, let's say...
Rabbi, were you thinking of Carl Sagan?
No, it wasn't Carl Sagan. It was not Carl Sagan. Not at all.
I just went.
It was a very influential person, very influential both in the environmental movement and in the internet, getting the internet off the ground.
Al Gore.
What was the name?
Al Gore.
Wasn't it?
Vice President.
No.
He claimed that he did both.
He was like the hippies, one of the hippie guys. Yeah, I'll get it. I'll remember. So now, when you're learning halacha, and one day you find out that you're not allowed to speak lashon hara. not allowed to say bad things about people. When you learn that, your concept of self, of other people, of speaking, everything has to change. Everything has to change. I thought that was okay. Oh, no, it's hurting other people. I thought you could speak whatever you felt like speaking. No, you can't. I didn't know my speaking affects others. Yeah, it does. You have to readjust everything by learning that.
Mm.
And really, anything you learn, if you're not just learning an idea, you're learning a new way of thinking. That means you have to apply that new way of thinking to everything that you learned before. Your new way of thinking applies to everything else. Yeah, no, the reason I thought of this is because we have major problems with AI today, the large language models, with forgetting. Because your information is personal, right? So what if you want to write a letter to AI or to Google and say, you have this information about this, my private information, I need you to remove it. Can they? They can't. They don't know how to do that. Because if they remove it, it's catastrophe. Everything else goes tumbling down. And the inverse of that is you have a car that's artificial intelligence and learned to drive on the city streets, which is totally amazing. And I don't think they can. They pretend at least they can drive on the city streets with minimal carnage. Okay. And it goes and learns. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just try it in San Francisco and streets of London. They banned it in San Francisco.
A few times in LA.
In LA, yeah.
And they're coming to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell me, I'll get off the street.
area they have them.
They're training them.
So what happens is then the same car learns to drive on the highway, comes back into the city, can't move. It can't put the two pieces of information together. And they say, well, we just have to make more memory. It doesn't work because once you get to that size, things slow down too much. Got mathematical ceilings over here. You can't traverse. The people working on this point out the human mind doesn't have this problem. Human mind is somehow able to take in new information without destroying. It's just slowly will convert everything else over, and slowly I'll adjust my way of thinking. And when I learn something new, one of the theories is the reason humans are able to do this is because we dream at night. And when we dream, we take the information we have and we put it into absurd situations, which is extreme generalization. And that's how we're able to integrate all this information together and work things together. But the point is that learning a new way of thinking changes everything in your mind. So that's an incredible union that's happening over here.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
What about combining this with non-Torah learning? Is that frowned?
There's a non-Torah learning. You're also, somebody asked that last week. So you're also, you did, yes. Rabbi. You're also, this union, he says, it's the physical world. In the physical world, any type of learning, this happens. The only difference is, Rabbi, what did I answer last week? It's a good thing you came this week as well.
This is about specifically the Torah and the
Is it a greater union with Torah? So the things of this world are all fragmented. In Torah, there's a harmony and a oneness. So the oneness is qualitatively different because of that. So there is, yes, a greater oneness, yeah.
Because you said like a couple of weeks ago, like you could learn anything you want, like in here about, like I forgot what you said exactly, but you said this is timeless. Like you want to learn about computers, it's in the Torah. So you use that example,
Yeah.
but like, for example, like
But you
you're-
won't be able to build a computer from learning the Torah. Once you build a computer, then you can find all these ideas.
correct, but you're learning about like AI and like computers, right? So like, I feel like that knowledge helps you,
To understand, yeah.
right? So like, if I
Because you're seeing applications.
right, but so
Right.
it's beneficial to bring
Right.
that and to combine it with this.
Let's just say there's another thing over here.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm learning about botany, and I'm learning about flowers and plants. Is there a flower, a plant in my mind? No, the plant's over there. I have the idea of it. I have information about it. I don't have it. You know, you go to the reception in the doctor's office. What's your name? Date of birth. You always want to know your date of birth because I want to send you flowers on your birthday. Date of birth. Okay. Look, I can't seem to find you on my computer. Lady, I'm here, not on the computer, right here in front of you, and I'm in your computer. No, I mean your information. My information is not me. That's my information. Okay. So when you're thinking you have information about you have the thing, you don't have the thing self. Okay, but let's say I'm learning Immanuel Kant. And I'm learning Immanuel Kant, and I'm learning how Immanuel Kant thought. I don't know why I would want to do that. It's the most boring author I've ever read, but say I wanted to, okay? So I'm learning Albert Einstein. I'm learning how Albert Einstein thought, right? So now I learned how Albert Einstein's thoughts. Are my thoughts his thoughts? If I come up with a great new idea, does he get the Nobel Prize or me? I do. But I didn't do it yet. But if I would, you know. So you don't really become one. You become with what you're learning of. It's about, so it's still about you. It's my way of understanding how he thinks. It's not his thoughts. When you're learning Torah, your thoughts are God's thoughts. The words I'm speaking right now, if I've got them right and I'm accurate, are words of Torah. So, for example, if you didn't say the brachas, and every morning you say 3 brachas on learning Torah. If you're going to speak words of Torah, say, well, it's just my words, and I'm just explaining. No, those are words of Torah. You have to say those brachas beforehand. You're speaking words of Torah. Your thoughts are God's thoughts. You come up with a new idea, that's God's idea. It's him thinking in your mind. It's his words in your mouth. He says that the rabbis say that whenever you read Torah, God reads along with you. Whenever you learn Mishnah, God is learning it with you. When you're saying those words, he's saying, why? Because it's your thoughts. How do you say that? You're not thinking about him. Torah is not about anything. It is the thing itself. To the point that some great Torah, Talmud Chacham, comes up with a brilliant new idea that nobody ever thought of. It's Torah. It's God's Torah. So it's not about, it is the thing. You can't give a lecture about Torah. If it's about Torah, it's not a lecture about Torah. It is Torah. That's the difference. So there's a much greater oneness. So who was a mathematician? No, he was a logician. It was Bertrand Russell. They say when he was caught, he was supposed to be, he was, I think, at Harvard, Princeton, and visiting professor. And he's teaching a class in ethics. And he got into an affair with an undergrad student. And they brought into the dean's office, you know, and everything was going on. And he said, you're supposed to be teaching ethics, right? And he says, is there for a mathematician a triangle?
What?
He says, it's just because I'm teaching ethics, I'm supposed to be ethical? Is a mathematician a triangle? Okay, so, and true, you don't become a triangle by teaching mathematics, right?
It's a good one.
Who was it?
Blanket answer for
What's his name? Galligan, whatever. He did a guy, somebody wanted to see, are people who study or teach ethics more ethical than people who do not? right? So it's simple. I'll get the return records from the university library, right? And we'll see if there's a greater incidence of returns on books on ethics. Guess what? There was a lower incidence. Conclusion: reading books on ethics does not make you ethical. Maybe it even teaches you how to justify your keeping the book. Okay, so you don't become that thing. But a person who is totally absorbed in Torah learning becomes a Torah thinker. And his decisions are Torah decisions, to the point that even if usually when you go to a Rav and you ask him, so on, what's the answer? You ask him, no, give me the sources. Right? And the truth should be able to provide sources for everything he said. Sometimes a really good Rav will tell you this is the answer. It's okay, what are your sources? I don't know right now. I don't know. I know, but are you sure? I'm absolutely sure. Why? And even if he has no precedent for it, he can tell you. I think it's. I think you have to do. You have to do like this. Why?
Just one with him.
This is his way of thinking. He's a Torah mind, and this is how it comes out for him. That's the way it goes. That's only with somebody who's really totally absorbed. His way of thinking now is a Torah way of thinking. Say if you're going to sit on a Beit Din, or a Beit Din has to have 3 judges. So the Sefer Mirasei 9, that's the Rabbi Yeshua Falk, one of the big guys there in Shulchan Aruch, on the page. So he says if you're going to be on a Beit Din of 3 people, don't be on a Beit Din with business people. He says, because they think the opposite of Torah thinking. The opposite, whatever they say is the opposite, To the point, if you want to know the Torah, what you're supposed to, according to Torah, you can't find a Rav, ask a business person, do the opposite, whatever he says. It's a totally different way of thinking, say. Different way of thinking.
But there's so many.
So who was talking?
Are you assuming that every rabbi who has studied Torah is a Torah thinker? Because clearly they're not.
Because what?
Is Torah thinker or acts according to Torah? Because clearly that's not true.
No, but I mean somebody who's totally absorbed all day long. That's what he is. That's what he's
Okay,
involved
so
in. Not just somebody who just learns Torah once in a while. Don't be people. This is their life. There are such people. This is their life, and sincerely, not in order to get all the respect and dignity, not because they're paid for it. This is their life, and so that's how they think, and their minds become that way. But I mean, any person that once you make that, you can, even if you only have some time in the morning, some time at night, but when you're doing it, you're 100% into it, and it's fixed and doesn't move. The times for learning, so then it has a deep effect on your mind and the way that you think, and this sort of answers also Tova's question on page 108. It is within you in the form of the Torah that your mind comprehends, grasps, and encompasses, according to your mind's ability to grasp it with your particular way of thinking, your capacity for knowledge, and your level of comprehension in the four realms of the Torah's orchard. So, which means that if you're a little child and you learn Torah this way, and this is why you come and comprehend, that's Torah. When you're a bigger child, you understand it differently, that's Torah. And when you're more grown up, you understand differently, that's Torah. At each stage, that's Torah. But if you learn it less than what you're capable of, it's not. It's not anymore. I think I gave the example. A little child learns that God smote the Egyptians with his mighty hand. And he sees a hand coming up, whack, like that. He sees, okay? No matter how much you convince, that's the child world. It's very concrete. That's what it's about. Okay, but when he gets to the age that's able, some sort of abstract thought and metaphor and something, he can't think of it that way anymore. It's no longer Torah. It's no longer true. So we think of truth as something that, no, this statement is absolutely true. It's not so true. If it's true, it can go anywhere. And in each mind, it's true in that place. So that's an example I gave last week is you're sitting out on the night of a full moon at the outdoor cafe, and you look in your glass and you see a little reflection of a little moon there. And then you see there's a little pond next to you, and there's a reflection of the moon there. And see the ocean is over on the other side over there, and it's a big reflection. It's all exactly the same moon, but each one reflects it according to their size. So that's what truth is. Truth is able to go everywhere and to everybody, each according to the comprehension. But if you're not using your mind 100%, then that's not true. If you are using your mind 100%, this is what you can understand, then it's truth. So that's God coming down on our Sinai to each individual, you and to you and to you. Your God, your God. Each one to them on their level, and each one is absolute truth. Okay, next week is after we'll receive the Torah, and then we can finish this chapter, God willing. From that point on, take this home and read everything inside, and then you can contradict me next week and everything. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
Yes,